Hey guys, what's up? So, due to popular demand, we're gonna do a video on my PC rig because I built a PC. Or I didn't build it. My friend built it for me. So I'm sitting here with my friend. So we prepared a little bit of gameplay footage. You see it in the background, and you can definitely, if you follow my channel, see the difference to my regular videos because the quality is significantly improved. It runs with 60 FPS. It's all great. But in this video, we're gonna basically break down the components we used. And we're going to show a little bit how we built the PC. And hopefully, if you plan to build a PC, then it will be helpful for you and you can learn a few things. So like I said, I'm sitting here with Tobias, who is my friend. I would say, are you my friend?
Somehow.
So this video is mainly going to be two Germans trying really hard to speak English. And we will definitely screw up a few words. So please forgive us if we do that. And that's where we're cutting to the footage. So you see the components that we chose to build into this machine. And we're going to go through these one by one and maybe say a few words. So the first one is the motherboard. So this one is called the Z170 Pro Gaming motherboard from Asus. Now, I don't think it's like the most high-end mainboard you can buy. You can definitely spend more money. I don't know how much was it, 130?
130, I guess, yeah. Around 130, 150 pounds.
Around 130, 150 pounds. So it's definitely not the highest range. Would you say that if you want to build a gaming PC on a budget, that you can buy even a cheaper mainboard?
Yes, definitely. The mainboard is not the most important component. Exactly the opposite, because the mainboard doesn't do anything at all about the performance. It's just about like features and additional maybe SATA ports for hard drives and stuff like that.
Yeah, so basically that means you can buy a cheaper mainboard if you're on a budget and you don't want to spend that much on your gaming PC. But like I said, this one is already not the most expensive one. Now this one is the hard drive. It's 500 gigabyte Samsung SSD, and there is another SSD that is built into this machine. And I think we're going to wait to the second one to go into a little bit more detail about that, because it's quite interesting how you use the SSDs in the PC. The RAM, 2 times 16 gigabytes, so 32 altogether. G.Skill, it's pretty standard. Just a quick word like RAM. Can I buy no-name RAM brands?
Yes, definitely. The brand doesn't do anything at all. Just go for the amount you need. For maybe if you want to do overclocking, then you should consider like the maximum frequency which the RAM is rated. But in all other cases, maybe it's an option to consider like warranty of the manufacturer, but that's pretty much
But it doesn't really matter. Like I can, because I think these two RAM bars, there's like, how much was it? 124 euros.
Exactly.
So if you, and the other thing is like, this is 32 gigabytes of RAM. You just don't need 32 gigs really, right?
Especially not for a gaming rig.
Yeah, because very few games I read use more than 16. That's already an exception that they actually use 16. So,
but we tried out some games the day before. We figured out that, let's say, I don't know, 30% of the RAM was in use. So
yeah, so most of it wasn't even used. So it's pretty pointless. So that's another thing. If you want to build your PC, you don't need that much RAM. You know, if you get 16 gigabytes, it's more than enough. Going to the CPU that we got now, that's an interesting one. This one is the i7 6700K. Now I learned during the build of this PC that the K means, and you can see it there on the thing as well. It's basically unlocked, which means you can overclock it. Is that right?
That's right. But you can pretty much overclock like any CPU. The point with the K is that you have like an unlocked multiplier. Like the FSB is the base frequency of the CPU, and the multiplier defines like, depending on which model you have, how much like, is it 400 times 6 or times 7 and so on. So you can basically overclock the CPU without overclocking the FSB and other components of the system.
I think most people have no idea what FSB means, but we just leave it. We just leave it like this. So the thing is, so why would I buy the K version, which is unlocked, if I can overclock any processor anyway? What's the benefit of the K version?
Yes, if you are a noob, then it's definitely easier to do overclocking with the K version.
All right.
As I said before, you can like overclock any CPU, but the K version with a fitting mainboard, it's the easiest way to do that.
Right, and also what's interesting on the packaging on the bottom, you see there underneath the little sticker, it says LGA 1151, right? And that describes the socket that you put the CPU on, right?
Exactly.
So you see, I didn't know that. So when you want to buy a CPU and you want to make sure it matches a certain mainboard that you buy, you need to check out this socket, like the socket. So this one socket is like 1151. I think there's also 1150. Exactly. And there are several ones. So you just need to make sure your CPU matches this.
1150, for instance, is like the previous version.
So when you buy a mainboard and you want to make sure your CPU fits that, you just need to make sure that this code matches the code on the mainboard. So then come to the next part, which I think is, it's the second SSD. So you can see already, if you remember the first SSD we showed, it looked more like a black little box, nearly like an external hard drive or something on the outside. And that one looks more like, I don't know, like a RAM. So it's actually interesting because you're going to see it later when we build the machine. But this one sits on the board directly, while the other one sits on the back of the board behind it, and it's basically connected via a wire. So that one sits right on the board. So how can you differentiate the two if you want to buy those? Is it the EVO or what describes this one?
No, it's like the M.2 description, which differentiates between SATA interface and M.2 interface.
Ah, right. So the M.2 interface is the one on the board.
The M.2 is the one on the board, is like the most recent standard to connect SSDs to a mainboard. The main idea behind this that SATA is basically like a bottleneck for the SSD to communicate with the mainboard, and the M.2
overcomes that
bottleneck. Exactly.
Yeah. So,
in terms of bandwidth,
but because on the board there's only one slot for the M.2, right? So you can't, or so you can only connect one of those.
I mean, there are like more sophisticated boards with even more M.2 sockets, but the most cheaper boards don't even have an M.2 socket, so you definitely should consider this before buying like any SSD. What kind of connectors you have?
Yeah, right. That really makes sense. Okay, that's cool. So two SSDs. Then we have this giant cooling unit, two fans. You're gonna see it later. There's not that much I think we can say about that. Except the brand, you can see it all there, the serial number on the top right corner. If you're interested. And then the graphics card, obviously the heart of the operation. Now that, took me a while because I was really thinking about, should I go for the Titan X or should I go for the 980 Ti? And I wouldn't say a lot of research, but I did some research. And you check out all these online comparisons, and it's actually funny. So if you want to buy a graphics card, at this point, I would personally strictly say, do not buy a Titan X because it performs just ever so slightly better than this graphics card, and it costs nearly double, right?
Yeah, not exactly double.
Yeah, nearly. That's why I say nearly.
I would say if you want to buy a Titan X, if you need it, you know it,
Yeah, okay. So obviously for a certain group of gamers, a Titan X is still an alternative. But if you just look at the benchmarks, the GeForce GTX 980 Ti sits very, very close in terms of the results to the Titan X, and it literally costs let's say 2/3 maybe of a Titan X. A bit less actually. It's between half and 2/3. So you actually can save a few $100, which makes a big difference. And I mean, this card is already quite expensive, for normally I think it's like £450, which adds up to $550 or whatever. So it is not a cheap card, but nonetheless Titan X costs even much more than that. And then final piece of the build is the power supply unit, I guess.
Exactly.
And so power supply unit. I can't say anything about this because I have no clue except that it supplies power. But maybe is there anything you want to say about that?
That's pretty much a basic PSU. It's well tested. It supports cable management, which is pretty neat.
And you're gonna see that later.
Yeah, so you don't need like the Molex connectors, for example, and can build like a pretty clean PC, and that's pretty good bang for the buck.
That's good. Yeah. So how much? I don't remember how much we paid for this one, to be honest.
I think it was like 45, 47 pounds.
So it's actually quite cheap.
Yeah.
So, and is this something? Can you buy gaming power supply units, or is that, I don't know?
Sure, you can
Buy
buy
anything
power
that says
supplies
game.
with like double the wattage rating, but it's pretty much useless.
Pretty much useless. So it's another thing where you can just buy like a more or less cheap one.
I would say if you want to buy, if you need like a bigger power supply, you know it, yeah, because then you have like the components who need that. And
Yeah, so that's the other thing. Check the power supply of your graphics card, because that's the thing that sucks most. Is that right or wrong?
You mean the power recommendation, power supply recommendation
For the graphics card, yeah, because that's normally fairly high, right? And then you need to validate the power it needs versus how much power this
can
unit
always
supplies.
there are online like power supply unit calculators where you can pretty much set up like all your components you have, and you get a recommendation what the wattage of your PSU needs to be.
Perfect. Yeah, that's
rated.
really good.
Yeah.
That's really good. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Again, guys, if you have any questions to this, then just feel free to ask that down in the comment section. We will, or I will do my best to answer it all and help you with your build. So then we went to it, and actually we haven't talked about the actual case we bought. I think this one is called Define R5. Is that right?
That's right, from Fractal Design. It's like the third box I bought from this brand, and was again like really happy with the quality and the overall finish. Really good bang for the buck.
So this one has there are better ones obviously, but fairly good audio. Like blocks out the audio, the noise the computer makes. Is that right?
Exactly. The sidewalls are like, how do you say it? Stick with bitumen from inside, which makes it really dampens like the walls. When you have a cheap case, really much it rattles and it's noisy, and this is like really a solid deep sound when you knock with your hand on it.
But again, if you're on a budget, you don't need to buy a case like this.
Exactly.
But then again, this case was like £110. So if you spend a computer anyway,
I think it was £90.
This was £90, but you know you can spend less on a case. That's pretty much
the thing
fine.
is, you don't need a case at all. In general.
Yeah, exactly.
You just can
That's
put
true.
your hardware on the desk and
yeah, that's it.
whatever will work.
So I had to play around with it, and then basically pretty much this is just an overview of the little details that the case offers. Yeah, this shows exactly this bitumen cover on the inside that basically blocks out all the audio and also keeps the temperature inside constant. I think like it helps
doesn't do anything with
lying. I was totally wrong. On the back of the case, you can see this little breakdown, which obviously will match up with the board.
Like the mainboard shield.
Let's go. Okay.
Definitely consider placing it correct, because otherwise it's like
if it doesn't match up, you will
get it out, to pull it out again, and maybe you bend it or destroy it, and
right. So there we have the board out of the box. Looks pretty neat. It's all cool, nicely designed. You can see it's a gamer board, and we made fun of this because it's ridiculous. Even a board, says it's a gamer board. It's pretty much pointless. It's just a marketing thing. They call it that.
Exactly.
Basically, this shows the position where the board is going to go. Sorry, we're basically looking through these videos and we're commenting as we go along. So that's why every now and then we might break. But yeah, what we're doing here is we put in these little, I don't even know how to call them, like little spacers, right? Which are like little metal pins that you put in that basically hold the board above the surface of the casing, so that the board doesn't sit on the case.
And they're like really important. If you don't mount them and screw like the screws directly into the backplate of the case, then you will pretty much short out like the contacts on the backside of the board, and it will pretty much destroy your main board. So.
Okay, so very important thing to do that. Also interesting thing here, I don't know, not every case has this obviously, but you can see what type of board requires what kind of arrangement of screws. So, you know, you can see on the right, the screw hole has an M next to it, which means it's used for a micro ATX board. And that really helps you because every board, not every, but most boards have different arrangement of screws, and this helps you to understand that pretty much. Then the board goes in, basically, and yeah, it sits in. And at that point, if you did it correctly, these screws will match up, and you just need to tighten it and put it in place. So there you can see that in an ideal world, the board matches up with the shield. Did you call it the shield?
Yeah, exactly.
So you can see all the you know, exhausts, I said, but all the connectors line up with the shield. That's all good. And if you did your job correct, then all the screws match up with the holes. Now, when it comes to screwing in the main board, I think there's a trick, right? First of all, don't tighten them too much, right? You don't want to screw them until you hear your board cracking. Exactly. You want to make it tight because your PC will sit like vertically, so the bolt doesn't fall out, obviously. But you want to make sure that you do the inner ones first. Is that correct?
That's correct. Because you want to prevent tensions from happening throughout the board.
Yeah, basically you screw in the ones in the middle first, and then you screw the outer one. So you screw from the center to the outside to avoid tension. If you do the outside ones first, maybe the middle one misaligns slightly, and then you need to adjust it with a screw, and that leads to tension on the board, and that's like in the long run stuff you really don't want to have happen. So you can see you do all the middle ones there first, and then the ones on the corner. And then the next part we put in, and this is also interesting because it just shows you the order in which we put all these elements in. Next part we put in is the cooling unit. We didn't even put the CPU in yet.
No, because we need to mount the retention kit first, which is like basically a bracket which holds like the CPU cooler in place. And you always mount the, I mean, it generally doesn't matter. You could fit the CPU first and then mount the retention kit, but yeah.
So the retention kit you're talking about is basically what you see here, which is...
This is like we see the backplate, and the backplate is part of the retention kit. Retention kit means that it's like a more sophisticated way to fit the CPU on the main board, because the CPU cooler is like extremely heavy. And it's beyond the specifications Intel released for a CPU cooler in terms of maximum weight. So there needs to be a retention kit to...
Right, so it avoids the board from breaking, basically. It stabilizes the big cooling unit. You're going to see them. And then, obviously, before you put the cooling unit in, you want to put the CPU in. So here's the condensed unboxing video of the CPU. It comes with a little manual, and it sits inside this neat little pack. Now, one thing you said, which is quite interesting, is obviously it sits inside this little plastic casing. But you said definitely keep the plastic casing in case you want to...
Just in case.
Yeah, because it basically holds the CPU perfectly.
Exactly.
And you know, if you need to take it out, store it somewhere in the future, this little plastic case is definitely
you must not touch like any contacts, since the risk of electrostatic dischargement, and also like the acids on your skin may damage like the contacts and lead to problems. So you must never touch like any. Not the socket nor the CPU.
Yeah, so don't touch the socket, don't touch the CPU from underneath. Here you can see it now. So the socket is opened, right? You can see all the little connectors there. And if you check the serial number of your board on the CPU, then ideally they should match up perfectly. And the CPU should fit perfectly in the socket. So what's interesting here is, and we were kind of puzzled about this as well, you can see there's a little plastic frame sitting around the CPU, which is called a retention kit. I guess it links... retention kit is part of what's behind it as well. We spoke about that, right?
It's part of the socket. We have like this LGA 1151 socket here, and we basically need like some kind of tray where the CPU is placed in, and it needs to be aligned. There is like one corner with a triangle on it, and it needs to be aligned perfectly. And it basically sits in this tray, and the tray goes on the socket and stays there. You don't release it. It stays there, and it's good for taking the CPU out without misaligning it and without damaging the 11 is exactly the number of the pins, like LGA 1151 means that they are like 1100 little
little pins.
Exactly. And you must not damage like one of them since you would destroy the whole mainboard.
Yeah, okay. That makes sense. So then, like you said, one corner of the CPU will have a little triangle on it, which matches.
See that, down left, if you see it, or you can highlight it maybe in the video.
Yeah.
Left, down left corner.
Bottom left corner. And that has to line up, obviously, and then you clip it into position, and it kind of puts the CPU.
Always check like the manual from the main board for further reference, and definitely read it first.
Yeah, exactly. It's always important to double check the manual. So then the retention kit on the back is now applied. It's basically screwed into place. I think previously we just checked if it actually matches up and all that. And that will then ultimately hold the cooling unit. Then on the front, you have to apply these. What are those?
Those is also part of the retention kit. Those are like the front brackets.
All right, so they hold this little X shape on the back in place, basically. Exactly, they just screw against it.
So we talked about the backplate. Now it's like the front bracket for the backplate, which gives like the support for the CPU. And, CPU cooler and the end.
Yeah, that makes sense. So obviously need to screw that. And again, you can see we're screwing across here. So you're screwing from one corner to the opposite corner to that one, and then to the opposite corner again. Don't screw them in a circle. It's all these little things. I think if you consider all these elements in the long run, it will help your computer to live a little bit longer. And then lining up the fan. Obviously now, because before you put this giant cooling unit on, you want to do all these little things on the bottom, because otherwise you're going to screw yourself over. You will not be able to reach this. So this fan, which sits on the back, obviously needs power, so that one needs to go somewhere into the board. I have no idea where, but
it's basically behind the I/O shield of the mainboard. There's a fan connector, chassis fan 1 I choose for connecting this particular fan, since it's like really nearby. And a hint at this part, you should consider connecting the PSU to the mainboard before putting in the CPU cooler, since we forgot that, and which made it like really hard to connect the mainboard connector.
And that also applies to the RAM. You will see it later on. Exactly. We apply the RAM. And then here it comes out of the box. It is the absolutely massive cooling unit. It looks even small here on screen, but when you hold it in hand, it's absolutely ridiculously big. I mean, you said as well, you probably don't even need such a big cooling unit. It's good to have because it keeps the temperature stable, but it's not necessary, is it?
First of all, it keeps the system silent. If you don't want to have like an annoying cooling fan, this is one to go for.
Right. Definitely. So, and generally it's like if the fans are big, they are silent, right? Because they just have not the small.
This is just roughly
right. In a noob speech, you can say that. So you can see the bottom part that looks a bit like an engine there, which will obviously line up with the CPU. So then obviously before you put the cooler in, you want to apply this, how do you call it? Cooling paste? I'm sure it has a cool technical term in English.
Yeah, thermal compound. You can
there you go.
Whatever.
Okay. And what it is basically, it's a paste that conducts heat and transports the heat from the CPU quicker into this cooling unit. Is that right? And with that, basically transport the heat off quicker from the CPU so it can cool quicker, right?
It pushes out the air.
Right.
Between like the CPU and the cooler, and that's the reason why you definitely have to use only a little amount. Maybe in this particular case, I use a little bit too much, but
so you could already see how much we used here, and that's already too much. So if you're applying your own, do much less than that. So now the cooling unit goes in. And it's clipped in position. I think you can see the screws there on the bottom left. Yeah, it doesn't clip, but it screws into position. Now you can see actually, because we briefly removed it again, it squeezes the thermal paste, and spreads it out neatly on the whole CPU. So hopefully the whole heat can be transported out quicker. And then you basically just screw the cooling unit into place, put it in position. If in this particular case, we had to remove the middle fan in order to reach the screws underneath. And you can see basically they screw into this metal part from the retaining unit now, right?
Very important is not to tighten like one screw all the way down and then start to tighten the other. In the first place, you definitely have to tighten like both screws like a little way, and then step by step tighten them down.
Right. So you do them as you see it here in the video. Do them one by one and tighten them down very carefully. Then next component that we built in, and that was actually a little bit stupid because we should have done it before, is the RAM. You can see it here, and most people of you probably know how to install a RAM bar. It's not particularly complicated. In this particular computer, this main board, you can see there are two types of little blocks down there, and slots, that's the right word, yeah. And two of them are light gray and two of them are dark gray, and you always need to put the RAM into the matching colors. So in this case, we chose, I believe, the dark gray. You can see it there. It flips in position. Trying to get a better angle here. But you can see how restrictive this giant cooling unit is already. Yeah. It's a bit stupid. We really should have put that in
basically
beforehand.
You need to know you see there is a notch, and it's very important to line up the notch against the main board. So what's
the notch?
The notch is the little gap in the middle of the connector.
Oh yeah.
It will only align in one direction. So if it won't fit, you just can check it, and you will see on the main board that it needs to align properly.
Yeah.
And otherwise, you can damage the board if you force it in.
All right, and what you could see here is that you told me this, that the connectors on the left, or these little golden pieces on the left, are slightly shorter than the ones in the middle.
Exactly. That's a new thing with DDR4 Ram. I was surprised, even I never noticed it before, but this time I noticed it. Yeah. And
don't clip with this. This causes loads of noise.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, that's basically it. But it's not especially to consider while putting them in. It's just
It's kind of a new
background fact.
It's a fun fact in the background, exactly. So then after the RAM is put in, the next thing is we put the big fan that goes in the middle of the cooling unit. Basically put that back in. Quite straightforward, just slot it in, and then it has little metal connectors that attach it to the cooling unit itself. Now, obviously your tower or your case that you buy will have connectors on the front, audio connectors, USB ports, and all that. Now those obviously lead with cables into the tower, and those need to be connected to the main board, and you can see here how neatly the cable management is coming through there. Now, where they go on the main board very much depends on the main board, and you really need to consult the manual. I guess if you're not familiar with it and you don't do it all the time, then just consult the manual. It's pretty straightforward, because there are not that many, but you still need to double check the main board, what goes where, and it's pretty clear. There's a reset button, there's the audio, the audio jacks and all that. So that should be quite straightforward. Now, after that, we decided to install the other SSD, which is the first SSD for this video that we do. Now, that's the one, you saw it earlier. Looks a little bit like a very thin external hard drive or something. It has these connectors on the back, and I had no idea where those go. I thought they go into the hard drive rig where all the other hard drives go, and you probably can screw them in there.
Yeah, roughly. It's basically a 2.5-inch standard notebook size dimension.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty much most SSDs nowadays have this dimension, and the mainboard is the case. Sorry, is exactly designed to put them like behind the mainboard since they are so flat.
Yeah, so they're so thin. So you can see it there. This is kind of a white case that comes with your case, and you see it there on the right. There's another one. So they are screwed into position at the back of your case. And I had no idea that that's where they would go, but that's where you screw your little SSD, and then basically after you remove the frame, you clip it into position, and you have this little. Yeah, there's a screw obviously, but It's kind of a thumb screw, as they call it, so you don't even need a screwdriver. You just put it in position. So there would be space to put down a second SSD next to it, theoretically, if you want to. And then you just link it up, connect the whole thing. So then the next thing that we installed, I believe, is the power supply unit. And I thought that's something you do in the very beginning, because I imagine it to be very chunky and big, and everything will be in the way once you try to get it in afterwards. But apparently it's not that big. I was quite surprised, and it could be moved in quite easily. And oh, there's the satisfying moment. Satisfying moment. Peeling off the plastic. Nice. So in this particular case, the power supply unit sits on the very bottom. In my old case, it was sitting on the top. Actually, I think. Was it? I'm not even sure.
No,
it wasn't. Okay, I thought it did. But so what's quite important on this one is, I think it, like you said, it sits on the bottom, so it can pull air easier. Is that right?
Yeah, basically the air is cooler the deeper you go in the room, so it pulls out the air from the top, from the bottom of the case, and basically it doesn't suck in like the the earlier already heated air, which is like exhausted from the graphics card or something like that, which will lead the PSU to spin up the cooling fan. So it's basically cooler, more silent, and it's basically the way to go.
Right, yeah, that makes sense. And obviously you need to clean it every now and then. But then if you do everything right, you can see there just 4 simple screws around the edge of the unit, and those basically screw it in place. And you could also see that the cable from the power supply unit just basically goes to the back of the case again to neatly manage the cabling inside the case. And then we finally come to the main heart of the machine, which is the graphics card, and I'm excited just to basically look at this. Really, it's really looking forward to that moment. A big moment for every gamer, I guess. But here it is in all its glory. Unboxing video, the GeForce 980 Ti. I think there's also the 980 Ti G1 now, which is another gaming edition, but just slightly overclocked or something. Has slightly more power. Exactly. But it's not a big difference. I mean, we spoke about the graphics card in the very beginning, and if most people know something about building a computer or modifying a computer, then it's probably how to change a graphics card, because that's the thing you do the most. Every other year you buy a new graphics card and just plug it in. You can see that the connectors there are protected with a little piece of plastic, which is quite common. And then the actual installation process, really straightforward. You just need to remove, in this case, 2 little of the metal coverings on the back, and make sure that it lines up neatly with is it a PCI slot on the bottom?
It's actually PCI Express, and in this particular case, the X16 slot, which can be differentiated in terms of length. Like the X16 slots are for graphic cards and maybe some hard disk drive controllers, and further down the video you can see like the X1 slots. They are shorter. They have like less data pins, so they can't transfer as much data as.
So you definitely need to make sure that the card you want to put in matches up with the slot underneath, and then it's a really simple process. These cards nearly slot themselves in because they are so heavy and big that they already put weight on your little slot underneath. But obviously you need to be careful. Need to make sure that the card matches up neatly. But obviously you need to make sure that your graphics card gets an external power supply. So you need to feed these cables that you see here straight from your power supply unit. You see it there on the bottom left, straight into the graphics card. Now this card seems to use 2 8-pin power supplies.
That's right.
And different cards obviously use different power supply pins, like number of pins. My previous one, I think, had 1 8 and 1 6. Exactly. So it had slightly less power that went into it. But obviously, you do need to check that your power supply unit has enough power to supply, let's say, 2 8-pins. What's the maximum? Is there like a 10-pin connector?
No, 8-pin is the maximum, but you can have like, I don't know, in this particular case, we have like 2 8-pin connectors. But if you go for like an SLI setup, you obviously need like 4 or even 6 of those connectors for every particular graphic card.
Right.
There are a maximum of 2 of those.
Oh, so 2 8-pins is the maximum.
maximum.
Is the maximum.
Right
Okay,
now.
so the Titan X, for instance, doesn't need more than that.
Exactly.
Can you SLI a Titan X?
Definitely, you can even 3-way SLI it.
Okay, so if you got way too much money, then 3-way Titan Titan X. So yeah, you just see how the power is fed into the graphics card there. And then now it gets interesting. We're installing the Samsung, the other SSD, the M.2 it's called, right? So that's the one I spoke about in the very beginning that looks a bit like a RAM, and you can still see it. It looks like a RAM, except that the connector's on the side. And this is installed straight onto the main board. And like you said earlier, I think it's kind of a new thing. Basically, because the data is not running through a cable, you get a more direct data transfer, and with that increased data numbers. So I mean, to be honest, it is a luxury thing, really. You could just buy another SSD and put it on the back next to the other one. Exactly. You will probably gain, I don't know, 50 megabytes or 100 megabytes per second or even more.
Okay, so the point of the M.2 SSD is there's like no bottleneck. I mean, there are like way more expensive SSDs. You can pay easily over about 500 euro for an SSD, and there you can get data transfer rates up to like 1 gigabyte per stack. And this is not like a high-end one, but the price to the SATA SSD was like really similar. So
why not? Yeah, yes, let's do it anyway. So I just thought it's quite interesting, and you can actually see now how it slots into position in a second. And it really sits in a weird way on the main board. In the beginning, I wasn't even sure, if it's sitting right or whether that's the way it's supposed to be. But you can see the tiny indentation there on the end, which lines up with the screw underneath, right? So that's basically where it goes. So once it's installed correctly, you actually slightly bend it down, put some, not pressure, but just some very light pressure on it, and then it hooks into the little screw on the bottom. And ideally, obviously, because this is the onboard SSD, which is the fastest, that's the SSD you want to put your operating system on, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, so you just want to, everything that needs to go really, really fast, whether it's maybe your favorite game that you play all the time and you don't want to have long loading times, whatever, you just put that on this SSD and it will give you the fastest loading times. So now it starts to look already like a computer, which is good. The RAM is in, CPU is in, the cooler is in, the graphics card, the power supply unit, and we have pretty much everything in place. The hard drives are installed, or at least the SSDs, and it starts to look pretty good. Obviously, we kind of mentioned it before, cable management is quite important and will increase the longevity of your machine. So it is quite crucial that you feed the cables through the back and you tie them up all neatly.
Yeah, exactly. The problem was like the mainboard cables, they run behind, as we said, behind the mainboard tray and the sidewall of the case. In this particular case, I had the problem that the gap between those two panels wasn't that big. So if I wouldn't refit the cables between the SSDs properly, the side panels would bend outside and sit on the cables, which you want to prevent from happening.
Right. So cable management, quite important, but it's kind of a science in itself, I guess. Probably if you build your first machine, you will not manage cable perfectly, but you can try. You can try. Just be aware of the importance. And then the big moment is there. Obviously, you connect it all. You put a USB stick in, and which holds the operating system, which hopefully will be installed. And I left the honor of pushing the on button for the first time to my little baby, which you see there on the right, and hopefully he gets it. He's not old. He's just 1.5 years old, but he does know how to push a giant button. He gets that. So oh no, don't remove the USB stick. And here we go. Yeah. He pushes the button, the light comes on, which is a start. We have to stop him from pushing the button again. And actually, surprisingly, it worked for the first time. The screen jumped on. It took a moment, but it all worked, and it goes straight to the BIOS, and then you make all the BIOS settings, make sure your hard drives are recognized and all that. And then you basically just install the operating system, and that's pretty much it. And I was quite surprised how well it went. Like, it went really smooth, obviously due to your incredible professionalism.
Thanks a lot.
No, but I have to say, like, you did a really good job, and it worked really well, and it still works now. And we're recording this right now on the new machine that you see being built there. And I think, like, the main reason why I wanted to do this video is also, even I didn't build it myself, but to take, you know, people's fears away a little bit, because I think a lot of people are just really scared of like building their own machine, and then they decide to better, you know, just buy a console or whatever. And I think in the end we put the operating system on, which is Windows 10, and it took, what was it, like 8 minutes, 10 minutes? Or you can see the clock coming up there after the first boot.
It said like 3 minutes 40, and then was the first reboot, and then the whole devices are set up and stuff like that. So in the end, I think the first phase was like only about 3 minutes, since we installed Windows 10 from really quick USB 3 stick, and which really boosts the performance.
Yeah, so we installed on a really fast SSD from a very fast USB 3.0 stick, which made the install very quick. Yeah, and that basically concludes the video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you guys learned something. That's obviously the main part. If you have any questions and you want to build your own PC and you're really scared to touch, I don't know, your RAM or whatever your problem might be, leave all that down in the comment section below. It's a very, very long video. I can see already. Oh my god, I'm gonna have to edit this down. But whatever it is, I hope you guys enjoyed it. Probably you didn't watch it to this point. If you did, and thanks a lot. Leave a like on the video if you did enjoy it. Subscribe to the channel for more, well, normally more video game stuff, but hey, there it is. So guys, take care, and see you next time. Say goodbye.
Bye bye.